our pretty new meeting space. This is a new addition for us here at the White House, so we're very pleased. Come on in. Just feel free to come in. That you're able to join us here today. As Greg said, my name is Tina Chen. I am the director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. Those of you who are familiar with Washington may have known this office by its prior name in prior administrations, which was the Office of the Public Liaison. We were renamed and recommissioned by President Obama earlier this spring to really be an office that doesn't just do outreach here in Washington and liaison with the government liaisons here from the national organizations, but to reach across the country and involve businesses and community leaders and local governments from across the country in what's going on with the work of the administration. And that's why we're so pleased to have all of you here today, because you represent exactly the kind of cross-section of stakeholders in this very key issue for the administration that we want to have a dialogue with. And that's what we hope you will do today, is really have a dialogue here with exactly the people who are leading our work here in the administration on energy and climate change. It is a top priority for the president. I think you've heard him speak about it many times, and we are really quite fortunate to have here both the two cabinet members who are leading this, both Secretary Gary Locke and Secretary Stephen Chu, and we'll get to them in a moment, and I'm really pleased that they are here. I want to acknowledge Greg Nelson, who started us off. Hopefully you've all been in touch with Greg, or you will get to know Greg. Greg does energy and climate change in my office as part of his portfolio. And so you can always stay in touch with him with any questions you have. I'm going to give you our email address, which I always try to do at these kinds of events, which you can use to communicate with us here at the White House on this issue, or actually on any other issue you may have. In my office, I have a staff of about 25 who cover roughly 60 different constituency areas and issue areas across the board. And so if you use this email address, whether it's this issue or some other issue, we can get it to the right person. It's the word public at WHO for White House Office, .eop for Executive Office of the President, .gov. So the word public at who.eop.gov. Please feel free to use that. We very much want to have an ongoing dialogue. We want to hear from you whether you agree with us or if you disagree with us as well. And that sort of direction I have from the president, which is he is anxious also to hear with people who have differing viewpoints, because that's what we will learn from, and we want to hear them and be able to incorporate that. And we certainly actually also want to hear if you agree with us. And if you support what we're doing, and we hope that you will speak out about that generally. So the issue that we're talking about today on energy climate change is obviously important, not just for what it means for the environment and our country in the future, but also what it means for our overall economy, and importantly right now, what it means for jobs and competitiveness for us, now and into the future. You all represent folks who are actively involved in this, and we today want to hear your viewpoints. We want to continue to hear your viewpoints. So again, thank you all for coming and for traveling, for many of you, to get here. It is really now my great pleasure and honor to introduce someone who has whose career I have followed from afar when he was in the state of Washington and I was in the city of Chicago, but who has also over time become a very dear friend, who is a real leader in this country on issues of business and competitiveness and innovation, as well as really being an outstanding leader in the Chinese American community, that as a two-time governor in the state of Washington, and now as our Secretary of Commerce, Gary Locke.
Well, thanks, Tina, for the introduction. It's really a pleasure to be here. Also to be here with Secretary Stephen Chu, and also Undersecretary of Commerce, Administrator of NOAA, Jane Lubchenco, who's also going to be part of the program in just a short while. I also want to acknowledge former Governor Tony Knowles of Alaska, incredible public servant, entrepreneur, business person, and a terrific manager of that great state of Alaska. and I really appreciate your coming a great distance. You may have traveled the farthest to be here, but also very knowledgeable on energy issues, environment issues as well. To all of you, thank you for your great interest in this very, very important topic. You are the trailblazers. You are the people on the ground, engaged in energy, engaged in and understand the benefits of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and also the severe impact that climate change will have on this globe. You're also very much aware of the potential of jobs and the impact of climate change and renewable energy, energy efficiency in terms of creating jobs, and that's why we're all here. I know a lot of people have talked, and we've all heard about the criticism of the cost of taking aggressive action on climate and on the energy front. But I can tell you through my travels around the country, talking to business people, talking to struggling families, talking to entrepreneurs and innovators, that the cost of not acting is much, much higher, Secretary Stephen Chu and I went to China about 2 months ago and got a first-hand glimpse of just how aggressively China is moving on the energy front, renewable energy, energy efficiency, alternative energy, smart grid, the list goes on. And that demonstrates to us just how much we have to really step up to the plate and how much more concerted and aggressive we have to be to respond in terms of climate change and renewable energy. It's a matter of economic competitiveness. It's a matter of jobs for the people of America, plain and simple. You know, in the next few years, some innovator is going to revolutionize a new lightweight battery for automobiles, or a safe and affordable way to capture carbon from coal plants, or simply a cheap and more effective way to store power from the wind and the sun. And you know, these are discoveries, these are going to be innovations, these are going to be efficiencies that fundamentally change our life. Just think about the power of the internet and even communication, and how just 20 years ago what we now take for granted today was simply unimaginable, unfathomable. The same thing is going to be happening on the energy front. And the question is, will those innovators, will those entrepreneurs be from the United States of America? Well, the President very much wants the brains behind those innovations to live in the United States, but not just live in the United States, but also to work and create jobs here in the United States. The U.S. has actually pioneered in so many fields, and we've been in the forefront of so many innovations. Take solar cells, photovoltaic cells, invented, discovered in America. But they weren't perfected for commercial and residential use. They were done in Japan. Perfected for residential and commercial use in Japan, and now primarily manufactured in China. There's no reason why this should have happened. And we have all the smarts and all the resources that we need as a country to be a leader in clean energy. And the President very much believes that the nation that leads in clean energy will be the nation that leads the world economy. And all we need is the willpower to act. You know, there's been a lot of skepticism on clean energy and on climate change. We've been hearing it for some 35 years now. And the public understands it. They keep saying, nothing changes. Why can't you in Washington, D.C. act? Well, the fact is that we've had a lot of fits and starts in the clean energy and energy efficiency, renewable energy front over the last several years. When price of oil was high, investors and industries jumped into the game. Prices dropped, and then the bottom fell out of the market. Well, this time it's different. And why is it different? It's because we know that we cannot survive any longer on cheap fuel with no externalities. Those days are over. You know, American businesses grew, and they always could count on cheap energy and without having to think about the consequences or those externalities. Well, we can't count on cheap fuel anymore, and the costs associated with fossil fuels are astronomically high. And businesses simply have to wake up to that reality, because I suppose we could go on for a few more years with business as usual, but when the seas start rising, when the floods increase in frequency and intensity, When droughts start spreading and lasting longer, you'd better believe that it's going to be bad for business. It's going to be bad for business. It's going to have an impact, a huge impact on people all around the world and on every business around the world. So companies are going to have to adapt to the new realities of the 21st century. And that means starting to be more efficient and using cleaner fuels. Well, the energy bill that's being debated in the Congress will make it profitable to be cleaner. And, the critics say that it simply costs too much. We've actually heard this before. In the early 90s, when there was a debate over market cap to curb acid rain, a lot of opponents said it was going to cost us some $50 billion and our electric bills were going to skyrocket. The reality is that it only cost 5% of that. 5% of that, and our utility bills actually went down. The lesson is, if we get the incentives right, the business community will respond and innovators will come up with new techniques and we will cope. In fact, in talking with so many people in the business community, inventors, innovators, investors, too many people right now are simply sitting on the sidelines. They want certainty. They're waiting for the Congress to act. And until the rules of the game are clear, why would any business person jump into the clean energy, energy efficiency, renewable energy field? Why would investors put in a lot of capital without knowing what the incentives are, what the rules of the game are? And the problem is that the longer that we wait in passing clean energy to provide those rules of the game, China keeps moving ahead. China is spending, as a government, some $12 million an hour on clean energy, promoting industries and developing industries in clean energy, energy efficiency, alternative energy. And let me tell you, they're not doing this just to meet their own energy demand and their own energy needs or to address climate change. They're doing all of this to also supply the needs and meet the needs of the rest of the world. And that means they will be creating millions of jobs for their people. And the longer we in the United States wait, the farther ahead China will be, and it will be harder for us to catch up. If we don't get our act together, we're going to be watching the capital, the business, and the good-paying jobs end up someplace else. And some 10, 15 years from now, we're going to be saying, how did Shanghai become the Silicon Valley of clean energy? That's the challenge that we face. I believe that America has what it takes. We have the smarts, the innovation, the know-how, the will. We've got that determination. That's part of the American spirit. And we've just simply got to get going. The President, through the Recovery Act, has put in hundreds of billions of dollars in terms of grants, incentives for clean energy, energy efficiency, research and development. All the different agencies are moving forward, and Secretary Chu will be talking a lot more about that. And he's got all the money, so I know everybody's going to be listening to him. But, we at the Department of Commerce are also focusing on a lot of these areas. We're developing the standards for the smart grid. We're doing it in record time. We actually hope to have the standards for the smart grid pretty much in place in roughly 10 months, or actually a year after we started this effort, which took the telecom industry more than 2 or 3 years to actually set the standards for the telecom innovations that we all use right now and take for granted. But we're moving very, very fast and very quickly because we know this is a matter of jobs. This is a matter of jobs. These are tough times in the United States right now. But the investments that the President has directed all of us to make, and with his leadership, we're talking about setting the foundation and the stage for new jobs of the future, good-paying jobs of the future that will meet the needs of our people, the economic needs of our people, as well as addressing the energy and the climate challenges of the world and of our country. So we need your support. We need your support. And in fact, you guys know this much more than Secretary Chu and I and others here in Washington, D.C., because you're living and breathing this every single day. We need your help to get the story out. We need you with your credible voices as business people, as entrepreneurs, as innovators, as experts in energy field to Talk to the opinion makers. Talk to your fellow citizens, your chambers, your colleagues. Write letters to the editor and let them know what it means for you, what it means to you, what it means for your community, and what it means for our children, both in terms of jobs and their quality of life. So we need your help, and we hope that we can count on everyone in this room to finally get this legislation passed so that we have that economic certainty that will enable the innovations and the investments to be made and to really put us on the right track of being competitive in the world in addressing this very, very critical issue. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to call up to the podium Secretary of Energy Steven Chu. Steven is a Nobel laureate, a great innovator, incredible academic credentials. But I have to tell you, more than anything, he's a person that's impatient. And he has brought that spirit of results, of wanting instant results to the Department of Energy, and he's shaken up the Department of Energy and brought that new enthusiasm and vitality to it. And so things that normally might take 3 or 4 years are getting done overnight. But more importantly, he's been an incredible advocate in talking about the benefits of clean energy from a competitive economic standpoint, but also the challenge that we face as a globe, as a planet, from global warming. And I have to tell you that when he was in China, he was like a rock star. The Chinese were press and individuals and government officials were just questioning him and wanting all of his expertise, and he was giving it away for free. He was giving it away for free. So if he had just sold that, we could have helped address some of the imbalance of trade that we have and brought in some money for the U.S. Treasury. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Secretary of Energy Steven Chu.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. Well, that's what academics do, actually. They give a lot of advice away for free. I just want to take up, Gary said the message very well, but I just want to take up a little bit and reinforce this. When Secretary Locke and I were visiting China and we talked to Premier Wen Jiabao, others, I was actually quite taken by how rapidly China had changed from the time we were there to the time 2 years before when I was, again, talking to the Premier about climate change, about transitioning to a sustainable economy. At that time, 2.5 years ago, the Premier was saying, well, China's moving forward. We want to improve our energy efficiency. This is good for China, things like that. We talked a little bit about how do you close down these old inefficient power plants. And he said, we're going to team up, people would have the finances to actually do this with those who can't afford it, local, provincial governments, things like that. It was different in the most recent trip in July. He said, the results of climate change, if we continue a business as usual trajectory, would be devastating to China and the rest of the world. Our increase in the use of energy on our growth and emission of carbon is totally unsustainable to China and the rest of the world. And so we have to move in this direction. And delivering this in essentially the same breath as Secretary Locke has said, this is going to be part of our economic prosperity in the future. So in this country, which has been has a heavy engineering influence on their leadership for decades, they got the message that climate change was real, it was happening, and what an incredible opportunity for China to be a leader in what essentially has to be a new industrial revolution. Okay, now, investments, for example, in high voltage transmission lines. They have a 1 million volt high voltage transmission now in operation, the highest in the world. They're putting in a 800 kilovolt DC transmission line and are aggressively going towards doing the R&D necessary to make a 1 million volt DC transmission line. Now, why are they doing this? It's because their renewables are in the western part of China. They're wind and solar. And all their population centers in the eastern part. So they're talking about transporting renewable energy across perhaps 2,000 kilometers. The DC line is going to be 1,900 kilometers in distance. Energy loss is targeted to be something like 5 or 6%. This is how much energy we lose in going a few hundred miles in the U.S. I asked the head of the so-called State Grid. This is a company that's now an amalgamation. It's a state-run company that's an amalgamation of many power generating and distribution centers in China. And I said, well, this isn't cheap. This costs a lot of money. And he says, well, we just, I said, how do your customers feel about that? And he says, of course, no one likes to have someone dip in their pocket and charge them more money. But we explained to them how important it is for the long-term future of China. Now, we do things differently in the United States. and I'm glad we do. And so what has to happen in the United States? Okay, so by fiat, their leadership says we're going in this direction, and they move in this direction. Now, so what's different? In the United States, what we can decide to do, and this is, policies developed both by the executive and the legislative branches of our government, we can set the conditions and ground rules to say this is where we'd like to go. It can be in the form of tax credits. It can be the form of things having to do with like SOx and NOx emissions. That's a regulatory thing, but it's a combination of regulatory things and incentives and long-term direction. Now, given that, if we lay these things out, that we have this palette of incentives and palette of other things, American industry actually can do a better job than China at achieving the goals. We just finished the first tranche of reviews for this new innovative way of funding energy development called ARPA-E. This is Advanced Projects Research in Energy. 3,800 proposals. We got together a number of outstanding reviewers by simply sending letters to presidents of universities, major research universities, saying, give us names of your best people who can review various energy technologies. So they gave us names, and we went and we called them up, and a surprisingly large fraction of them volunteered. It was just painted very simply. This is your patriotic duty to spend time so that the U.S. government can invest in the best projects. 4 person years later worth of reviewing, which was done in a record time, in about a month and a half. We're on the verge of being able to make the first announcement. This is the first installment of this program, okay? And the proposals that we were seeing, the ones that we're going to be recognizing, are truly outstanding, innovative, very, very exciting proposals. I was thrilled to be looking at those. And so we also had a thing where the 2 undersecretaries and I and the chief financial officer took a very hands-on approach. The 2 unders actually spent, in the final review stages, actually spent a day in the review process. And so this is what we're trying to do now, is make the best decisions possible. But the point here is that when we set the conditions correctly, including long-term signals to the United States that we will have, for example, a cap on carbon and we'll ratchet down. That long-term signal in itself will actually spur innovation that can far exceed what China can ever do. Okay, so this is ours to lose. This is an incredible economic opportunity. But if we get this thing right, the United States in the past has actually shown that it can actually respond to this challenge and really prevail. So this is something that I think we look to you. You have a voice. You have a major significant voice as the country is going to about to debate, as a bill goes before the Senate. As this country is going to debate what we're going to do, there are people and businesses who are quite frankly a little bit concerned. They see perhaps rising energy prices. They see this is going to upset my business model. And I think so it will be perhaps a rear guard action fight in order to to say, no, we don't really want to go forward. And we need the voice, the other side of the business community, which is an extremely important voice, to say, no, we're not going to fight a rearguard action. China is moving in this direction. Europe is moving in this direction. And if we send the right signals to the United States and to business that we can prevail and we can actually rev up the innovation machinery of the United States. We have the greatest R&D in the world, undeniably, but we eventually need the business community to say, yes, this is the direction we're going to go. This is going to be a key part of our future economic prosperity. So we urge you to, use whatever means you can. You have a very strong voice in this town, and to speak up and to let your views be known. It's something Secretary Locke and I deeply believe in. We don't want to let this opportunity pass. The train's at the station. It's getting ready to leave. Other countries have jumped on board. We can't say, well, we'll decide maybe 5 or 10 years later to do this, okay? That means it'll be a 5-year lead by the other countries. If you feel strongly about sustained support for things, let it be known what your feelings are. Sustained support means not up and down support in forms of tax credits. Let it be known. These things don't happen automatically, okay? But the people who are concerned and frightened are letting their voices be known. You should let your voices be known as well. And it's a matter of actually saying, we can do this. As Secretary Locke said, there is a cost of action. The cost of action is quite modest, and the cost of inaction is horrendous. We will have thrown away an incredible opportunity. And so we look to you to help us in this and help yourselves in this endeavor. So with that, I'll stop and we can just answer questions. Yeah. Where you're from, and after that, we'll just continue. Okay? Yes.
Hi, Jeffrey King, and I'm with a group that has come together, collaborative business leaders, called the We Can Lead Project. I want to thank you, Mr. Secretary, and also you, Secretary Locke, for coming and sharing your thoughts with the business leaders that we gathered 2 weeks ago here in town. As a former investment banker, having learned about the incredible role that policy will play in this particular sector, that's why I've gone nonprofit, fly with many stopovers, because I believe this is an incredible moment. And again, thank you for sharing with our business leaders the thoughts that you have. Also, I was here on Monday for the Vice President's presentation about recovery through retrofits, and the level of collaboration and engagement on the agency side has been impressive, and quite frankly, we see it as a call to action. So again, the We Can Lead Collaborative, and I did want to say to the folks in this room, in terms of the lending your voice, there are many avenues to lend your voice. We represent one. If you are interested in joining conversations with your senators, please come and find me. And my one question, given the fact that the two of you are sitting together, as, again, investment banker, I understand how much interest there is from institutional investors to put their money to work and how little of it is actually going to work. So I guess I would just ask you, how are you thinking about the loan guarantees of the DOE and the policies of the Commerce Department to allow that institutional investment in secondary markets to begin to go to work? Thank you.
Well, let me start by saying that that's one of the things that one of my initial focuses is to try to get the loan guarantee moving in an aggressive way. And what used to be taking years and no loans coming out, we're now trying to reduce to months. I think the capital is sitting on the sidelines now. It's still a concern. what I see is a little skittishness of banks to actually unleash some of that. And so loan guarantees are, in my view, a highly leveraged way of using federal dollars to help that capital get off the sidelines. And so we're very supportive of this. We think it's a great thing. And probably a couple times a week, I'm talking to the loan guarantee people, find out where they're at, what they're doing, what are the hang-ups. And so it is a very important part of our program.
We at the Department of Commerce are also focusing on how we can help entrepreneurs. That's why we've just created a Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship and a National Advisory Council that will be giving the White House and us and other policymakers in the federal government their ideas and their priorities in terms of whether it's the Valley of Death, the funding issues that entrepreneurs face, and as well as bringing to bear our research and disseminating that and helping entrepreneurs and innovators get their ideas to commercialization. But I think that there's really, quite frankly, from what I've heard, a lot of private capital that's available that's simply sitting on the sidelines. And they're not going to make those investments. They're not going to jump into the game until they know what the rules of the game are and what the tax issues, credits, et cetera, tax incentives are. I mean, you don't want to put your money into a field if the Congress says that they're going to focus on another area. So that is why it's absolutely critical in unleashing that capital to make sure that the Congress acts as quickly as possible. However they act, you need certainty. You need the rules of the game. And so that's why it's important that we not wait. And as Secretary Chu said, we don't want to be waiting 5 years, because that gives other countries a 5-year head start. And that means that their infrastructure, their R&D from other countries, governments into the field will have already taken hold, and we'll be playing catch up. And so it's imperative that you have your voices heard and speak out loudly and clearly, talk to the opinion makers, write letters to the editor so that your views are known, so that people in your community understand exactly what you're talking about.
So before we come, I just want to mention one thing. You know, business leaders say we want certainty. Well, some of the people in business want certainty, as in certainly this will not happen. And so when we say they want certainty, I mean it's clear directions that will give the United States businesses incentives so that we can rule in this new industrial revolution. That's actually what I'm personally asking you to do. Okay, you want to?
Sure, right here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also want to compliment the Department of Commerce in that we are having in Pittsburgh the beginning of a roadshow about green building technology with 6 highest level representatives of your department from European embassies, European embassies. And I'm inviting everybody who is interested in that field. Namely, what we really have to emphasize is not only the resources that we want to have in terms of renewable, but what we can do in energy effectiveness. And the built environment is a very big one. That's my comment and a compliment for your people who work in Europe. The second question I have, could you direct me in this city to the think tank that looks at all the interrelated issues of our infrastructures, namely Department of Transportation, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Energy, Commerce, and so on, right? Now let me just say, this is the second time I'm in the White House. 30 years ago, I was the first time. And if I look at what the United States has done in those 30 years, I'm horrified. In its infrastructure, its loss of trains, and the mobility loss, and so on. So what I'm really arguing for is that there should be a think tank that combines all the best thinking in academia, in industry, and in government in a holistic way. You were in China, I was in China this summer. They have invested the equivalent of $400 billion in rapid trains. The equivalent, okay? 100 billion Chinese money spent, so to speak, in dollars is at least 4 times. No eminent domain, no nothing, right? You can just do it and move it, right? And it is amazing what has happened in the last 15 years when I was in China, all off and on. And so what I'm arguing for is a think tank for the holistic point of view of the United States in all things. I hear, for instance, that we're going to have eminent domain for new power lines. Could that eminent domain of new power lines also serve as an eminent domain of rapid cross-country transportation? So our trains wouldn't have to share the tracks with freight lines? I come from the furthest today. I come in from Singapore, okay? My point is I came here for this meeting to make that point. And it's absolutely necessary that we have that holistic thinking. And I would like to know if anybody knows of that existence of that think tank.
So, you know?
Well,
Okay, great.
actually, hi, I'm Lori Rezoc, but I've been with Pacific Northwest National Laboratory with Mike Davis, who I know you guys all know, and also have been working on most of the large demonstration projects in the country with Ollie Penn and the Peninsula Project that DOE did, and then Boulder Smart Grid City and Power Sense DC with Charles Dickerson and the Pepco crew over there. And then I'm also with a technology vendor. But the question that I have in following up with his point, and I've been working with George Arnold at NIST, and then which Charles knows about Lance, and then FERC Commissioner Moeller and Jamie Simler at FERC and other folks, is what we're seeing out in the field is that the empirical evidence, a scientific term, but what we need in markets to create clear market signals, that learning that we're getting across these demonstration projects aren't really rolling up in a way where we, the big we, can learn from them. And the energy industry, it's a risk-averse industry. We need a lot of empirical evidence in order to take a look at decoupling. Just an example, when we're taking a look at the rates in the PowerSense DC demonstration, and we have lower income folks, and we have a lot of factors there, but they've got a lot of air conditioning units in Washington, DC. In Boulder Smart Grid City, when we're starting to do the next phase to evaluate rate design, they don't have air conditioning units. And this is just an example of when we take a look at the empirical evidence we need to shift policy. We need all of this information to move up in the aggregate, but in a way that has enough nuance and understanding behind it, which is expertise. It's not necessarily a think tank, because if you're not in the field, you don't understand these nuances. So Battelle Worldwide has been willing to provide their computational horsepower, and I know Dr. Stephen Chu, you were briefed on this notion of transparency about PNL, and sent some other folks through. But where do we marshal the evidence and bring in the expertise around it so we learn enough across this, we have a lot of disparity at a state level, but I've also been working closely with the Chinese through the China Clean Energy Forum and Stan Bearer, who you know quite well. And when I've been workshopping with the Chinese delegations, what they've said is when we talk and we collaborate as nations, and as you know with John Podesta's work, when we want to sit belly to belly, nation to nation with China to collaborate around energy and environment, the thing when we're in workshops with them, they say, we want evidence. What is working in the United States that we can learn from? And John Kerry just asked the Gridwise Alliance, what are the demonstrations we're doing in the United States and what are we learning from them? So I don't really think it's fair to say go run with an energy, so this is personal opinion. We're asking industry and markets to move around bills when we're throwing a lot of stimulus dollars out. We haven't quantified what questions we're asking, what do we need to understand so that we can answer those questions through these demonstrations so we have enough evidence to shift policy and a clear go forward. So, my question to you guys is, how do we bring this piece to bear so it can roll up into something he's talking about that we can share with markets both domestically and abroad?
Let me tell you what we're doing in the Department of Energy, because your point is an excellent one. States, local jurisdictions have been doing a lot of experiments. People have been pretty bad about actually getting quantifiable data. Let me give you a couple examples. There are many states who have very aggressive energy efficiency programs. We don't actually know how effective those programs are. I've asked, okay, let's look at the energy use in the state, both in the industrial sector and the residential sectors, and figure out. So that is easy data. We're getting that. It's a little harder to get the data on what policies were enacted when in which states. But we're gathering that. Another good example, with respect to energy efficiency, many of there are two extreme views of thought. One is there's a lot of free money to be had, $20 bills littered all over the street. McKinsey issued a report recently that said we could save $680 billion on energy efficiency investments where the net present value investment with a 7% 5% per year decline, $680 billion by 2020, reduce our energy use by 26%. That's one view. The other extreme view, there are no $20 bills on the street. The free market has made sure that they've all been taken up. That's another view. And so in order to find out what's the real truth behind that, we started looking at energy efficiency programs, and in particular, how much money was invested, for example, in a home, and how much actually did it really, in a net present value sense, actually save money. Well, it turned, and we don't want projections of money saved, because believe me, the economists don't like that. They want actual data on what's spent. So we went through a sieve. It took us a couple weeks, and what we found is a large scatter. Some of the programs actually recovered the efficiencies that were technically possible. So we have existence proofs that it actually works, but we have other, in this large scatter, programs which were not a good investment. They weren't really, again, using a 7% assumption in net present value. They weren't recovering that, okay? And so what this tells us is, and for example, if you do installation and energy audits and all these other things, if due to incompetence, due to less than ethical behavior, or lots of things could go wrong, you don't recover the savings that an engineer might say you can recover. But the fact is, the good news was that there are programs with hard data of real measured energy savings that actually did recover those. So what we're trying to find out is, okay, let's look into how those programs work and then disseminate that particular program. So it's exactly that. We're trying to get the hard numbers, not based on estimates of energy savings, but based on real measurement. And all the programs we're putting forward in the Recovery Act, we're saying part of it is we're going to use this to collect even more data. It's been surprisingly thin on the ability to collect, you know, after you've given out the money in the past, what we found is you're not even concerned about the data. This is going to a long discussion I have with my wife, who used to be the Dean of Admissions at Stanford, a huge amount of time trying to pick the right people, but they never tracked the people they admitted. Because, you know, it's not a line. This is the highest tranche of people, right? And so it's the same thing, you know, tremendous time and effort, and all of a sudden, once you've made a decision, you're not tracking anything, okay? And so we in the Department of Energy have decided we're going to start tracking stuff, because there have been experiments done, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. And so, you know, I'm a big, you know, this is my scientific background, I'm a big believer, and there is data out there. Let's go get it.
In fact, one of the recent grants that we at the Department of Commerce announced was for a longitudinal study, really focusing on, for instance, one company that makes batteries for commercial vehicles with a range of 100 miles on a single charge. These are big, big delivery trucks that serve your Safeways and Giants and things like that, and even utility vehicles with the buckets that bring, you know, take the linemen up, and they're out for a whole day. But we really need to understand the characteristics and operational issues and maintenance issues, the whole gamut. And so one of the grants that we announced several months ago for a leading maker of these advanced batteries for commercial vehicles was really to document the cost and all the performance characteristics for the next couple of years, just so that we have a lot more information. But I think that with the energy legislation that's being considered, that it's a market-based incentive, cap on reduction of carbon emissions, and with the various incentives there, that it's still providing us that framework by which we can move forward. It may not be perfect. We may not have the incentives exactly in the most technologically proven areas, but enough incentives for discovery and innovation and R&D that will certainly move us forward, and we simply have to move forward.
This is going to be our final question. We're going to run out of time.
We'll be back later.
I'm Barbara Tyron with the Electric Power Research Institute, known as EPRI. And for those who aren't acquainted with our organization, we cover 90% of the domestic electricity industry, and we do collaborative research and development, technology deployment, and we also have international participation. Following up on the questions about how we can integrate all of this, we have found through our analysis that what we call our full technology portfolio, looking at energy efficiency and integrating renewable energy, of course, is extremely important, and we are proposing to go forward with work in that area. But in addition, coal with carbon capture and sequestration, nuclear, and perhaps gas with carbon capture and sequestration, that we will need all of those if we're going to address the challenges that you both have identified today, which is essentially national security, environmental concerns, and also maintaining our economic prosperity. I'd welcome your comments on that.
Well, actually, I'd like to jump in if I could. I mean, that whole issue of utilities is something that I've had a big interest in, starting from my days as governor, when all the rage in the late 1990s was for energy deregulation. And there were a lot of pressures on the state of Washington, where I'm from, to actually deregulate our utilities and go the way that California did. And I think Montana and other states were going down that path. And we actually said, we don't think so. And I'm glad that we did not do that. But instead, we also pushed, and we then came into the energy crisis. And that's where we really found out that there's so much, there's an incredible relationship between the regulators and the utilities. And how do we provide those incentives? I think that for all of you, I mean, as we're, Secretary Chu, and with the funds that are developed being provided by the Department of Energy, hooking up with the Department of Commerce, we're focusing on the standards for a smart grid. Now, what is a smart grid? A smart grid really means that we're going to be using the power of technology to more minutely control the transmission of electricity, avoiding blackouts, more efficiency in that transmission, but also it really means for the consumer being able to take advantage of lower power rates and evening out the highs and the lows in power usage and demand. We don't go around as homeowners and as families building or having one bathroom for every person in the house so that everybody can take a shower at exactly the same time. I mean, we stagger the use of the bathrooms and the showers and the facilities. It makes more economical sense. We need to try and stagger our use of electricity, for instance. And so instead of building all these power plants just to handle the peak demand in the early morning and late afternoons and early evenings, we try to, if we can, even out that use, then we don't have to build as many power plants, and it saves us money, and it also is more cost effective as ratepayers. But with the advent of the smart grid, the full potential means that a homeowner can say, the utility is going to charge less for electricity at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I want to be able to have my electric clothes dryer come on at 2 o'clock in the morning to take advantage of that. Now, that's being resisted in many quarters by advocates, whether for low-income, elderly, or even environmentalists. And then the whole issue of decoupling. Shouldn't we have incentives for utilities to invest in energy efficiency, and instead of just rewarding utilities for building more power plants? The incentives are all wrong. There's so much that we can capture by way of energy efficiency and reducing carbon emissions by energy efficiency, as opposed to the best technology for building the next power plant. We can do more for reducing carbon emissions by being more efficient in how we use electricity now. And that's going to create a whole bunch of jobs, all right, as well as benefiting the planet. But you have a lot of stakeholders and people in the states and the utility commissions that are all at the state level who oppose decoupling. And so this is where we need your voice. And when we get back to the whole issue of think tanks and what's the most effective technology, if the utilities were allowed to get compensated for being energy efficient, and they can then come up with their ideas on how to be compensated and how to promote energy efficiency, they will do all that research, and they're going to take advantage of all the latest techniques, and instead of government just trying to figure it out on our own. This is where the private sector will be knowing that their bottom line is affected. I mean, they're going to be engaging a lot of this research and really promoting best practices and wanting that verifiable data before they jump into the game as well. So I think that we can talk about clean energy and energy efficiency, et cetera, but the rubber hits the road down at the utility level, at the local level, and we've got to see how we can embrace and bring everybody together on this issue.
Let me,
Secretary Chu.
very quickly on decoupling. I think it has to be what I call decoupling plus. What that means is that right now there are states that have rules that say that allow utility companies to anything they invest in terms of promoting energy efficiency, they can recoup their investment. That's actually not good enough because they'll take that. And they'll take those investments, and maybe even get a little bit. But they're also still the old business model. You still make more money by selling more energy is still there. And so what one needs, and this is what California has done, is to say it actually will be at least as profitable to promote energy efficiency as it will be to build a new power plant. And once that incentive is aligned, then you get real participation in energy efficiency. So it's not just, oh, we'll recoup your losses. So it's not just decoupling. Decoupling, if it doesn't have that incentive, it won't do the thing. We want to align return on investment incentives very clearly to say it's better to invest in energy efficiency and load shedding and all these other things than it is to build a new power plant. With regard to specifically your questions on, we're going to actually need all of this. We don't have, I'll be the first to say, we don't have economically the technologies today that can really capture, sequester carbon dioxide. First, you start with coal, but we will actually need to do it with gas. If you look at the target by 2050, decreasing by 80%, you need gas as well. You need it all. This is where the federal government is critical. The research and the early stage development really is going to have to be done by the federal government. The good news is, over the last 5 years, I'm seeing really startlingly new ideas that could transform the landscape. It's just not, okay, here's how we gasify this, we're going to use amine or maybe cold ammonia. I'm seeing much, much better ideas for after combustion capture or gasification. Much better ideas on how do you gasify. Much better ideas on how do you compress carbon dioxide using supersonic compressors that could be factor 2 more energy efficient. So these things have all come out. Again, I go back to what we were saying before. You can either have toy demonstrations and little slipstreams of 5% carbon dioxide, but in order to get industry really engaged on what we need to do, you need that long-term signal. All of a sudden, that long-term signal is not, oh, you know, they're willing to invest in this, but they don't really think it's going to work. And in talking to some businesses, they're just doing it, but they have no intention of actually deploying unless there's a real signal that says you should deploy. They're just going to, it's a little plaything. And so that's what I mean about those long-term serious signals about where we will be by 2020, 2030, 2040, 2050 in carbon. And once you have that plan out there, then you get serious commitment to solving the problem rather than, you know, it's like the car of the future and always will be. We don't want that. And again, I go back to what Secretary Locke and I were saying at the beginning. Other countries have realized that they're going to go ahead and develop this technology. Okay, so we've got to do it. We have the ability to develop the technology that will enable us to capture and sequester the carbon better than other countries if you set those long-term goals in place. So,
great.
Okay, thank you all.
All right.
Folks, we're going to transition now to a panel.
Secretary Locke.
We're going to transition to a panel now. We're going to hear from the business leaders who have been working with the Department of Commerce on product and services that we talked about today. So let me bring the panelists up and we'll go ahead and get ourselves transitioned.
Pardon me? Oh, thank you. Ooh, thank you. That's very nice.
All right, folks, if we could settle back in, please. Great, thanks. As mentioned, the next part of the program, we're going to get into a panel and some Q&A with some of the business leaders who've joined us today. To moderate the panel, we're very thrilled to have with us, not only because she's from my home city of Corvallis, Oregon, but because she's one of the most important figures in understanding climate and energy, both in government and outside. Ms. Jane Lubchenco, the Undersecretary for Oceans and Atmosphere and the Administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association.
Thanks, Greg. Hello, everyone. I want to add my very warm welcome to each of you for joining us here today. I think this is a very exciting event with a focus that is extremely important. I want to thank our distinguished panelists for spending time with us as well. I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say about their business strategies. It's a very deep honor for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to participate in, support this event. And I want to spend just a few moments giving you some introductory remarks, and then I will introduce the panelists, and you will hear from each of them. Energy and environment is clearly one of the cornerstones for the President. As head of an agency, a science agency that's vested with responsibilities for oceans, weather, climate, and ecosystems, I strive to ensure that the science and services that we at NOAA provide are meeting the evolving needs of businesses, of communities, and of government. Let's take the energy sector, for example. The energy sector at large is dependent upon accurate weather and climate information for day-to-day operations and for planning for future energy production. My organization, NOAA, provides data such as temperature, precipitation, relative humidity, forecasts of meteorological parameters, and products such as heating and cooling degree days that provide information to the energy sector about energy demand expectations and the mix of generating units available to meet the demand. Many areas of the rapidly growing green energy and renewables sector are tied even more closely to weather and climate conditions, not only because these same fluctuations in demand, but because of climate's impact on the availability and the supply of new energy sources. So NOAA's climate services help project expected wind, water, ocean, and growing conditions in different regions of the world, providing critical information to clean energy investors as well as to developers. Having provided weather information to the nation for over 135 years, NOAA is now the leading source of science-based climate services, providing the information and data that Americans need to adapt to a changing climate and a changing world. NOAA is also currently conducting a strategic energy review to provide an integrated and comprehensive understanding of the agency's evolving roles related to energy, particularly as it relates to the emerging clean energy economy. This will include workshops on onshore wind and solar, biofuels and biomass, ocean thermal energy conversion, and offshore gas and oil, just to name a few. I speak as a scientist and say and emphasize what both Secretary Locke and Secretary Chu said earlier. The science is pretty clear that the climate challenge before us is very real. We're already seeing impacts of climate change in our own backyards. Many of the observed climate-related impacts that we have already documented include things such as increases in global average surface, air, and ocean temperatures, widespread melting of snow and ice that threaten freshwater supplies, changes in precipitation and water availability across the country, and rising sea levels that encroach upon our coasts, among other impacts. NOAA has a unique role to play in supporting you as you navigate economic opportunities that place the environment and management of our natural resources at the center of an evolving new business model. NOAA accomplishes this through our science, services, and stewardship mission. That is, improving our understanding of and our ability to predict changes in the Earth's environment, and by providing some of the tools for conserving and managing ocean and coastal resources. NOAA's resources, available to all, range from drought monitoring and prediction to satellite systems, weather forecasting, and climate services, just to name a few. The end goals are to empower businesses and the public sector alike to make better decisions about infrastructure, about public health, safety, resource management, and research and development. We recognize that 1/3 of the U.S. GDP is weather and climate sensitive. This is a potential impact of $4 trillion per year. The Department of Commerce is uniquely positioned with leading atmospheric, oceanic, and climate scientists and a solid relationship to the business community, industry, and manufacturing to deliver climate-based scientific information to inform mitigation and adaptation strategies that allow the business sectors, states and local governments, and citizens to be more sustainable and resilient in the face of a changing climate. So this is a brief overview of some of the assets that we at NOAA bring to this discussion, which is intended to tee up some of the comments from some of our panelists. And so now I would like to segue into an introduction of each of our panelists. Each of them will have roughly 10 minutes to present remarks to you, and then I look forward to a fruitful question and answer session following their remarks. Our first panelist will be Donna Zobel. Donna is the president and CEO of Myron Zucker, Inc., which provides electrical power quality and energy efficiency solutions to manufacturing companies. Prior to joining Myron Zucker, Inc., Donna was a global research and development executive for the pharmaceutical company Pfizer, Inc. Donna is a member of the National Association of Manufacturers and the U.S. Green Business Council and the National Association of Women Business Owners. Our second panelist will be Mark Galswick. Mark is the president and CEO of Easy Energy Systems, a company that specializes in the manufacture and support of modular ethanol production systems. Easy Systems, Inc. received the Inc. 500 award as one of the 500 fastest growing companies in the nation. Mark has made a career of creating agricultural-related businesses, particularly in the feed automation industry. Our final panelist will be Michael Walsh. Michael is the executive president of the Chicago Climate Exchange, a self-regulatory exchange that administers a voluntary, legally binding greenhouse gas reduction and trading program. Mike previously served as a senior economist with the Chicago Board of Trade, where he led their efforts to design exchange-based environmental markets, from sulfur emissions to recyclable materials. He has written extensively on the economics of energy efficiency and has published articles in the Journal of Futures Markets, Energy Economics, and others. Mike has been on the faculties of the University of Notre Dame and the Illinois Institute of Technology. It's my pleasure now to invite Donna Zobel to provide her remarks. Donna? Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a wonderful opportunity to be able to speak to you today about my experiences utilizing the Department of Commerce's sustainable manufacturing tools and programs. And as you heard, my business, Myron Zucker Incorporated, located in Sterling Heights, we manufacture power factor correction capacitors and harmonic filters which improve energy efficiency and improve power quality. And this is anything from a single motor all the way to an entire plant. And so most of my experiences with the Sustainable Manufacturing Initiative and their tools has been through my, my desire to want to help my customers who contact me, usually with energy. They're in a situation where they're getting a penalty from their utility, and they need someone to help them design the equipment to get them out of penalty. So a few years ago, in an effort to learn more about all the things I could do for my customers, I joined the U.S. Green Building Council. And through my involvement with the U.S. Green Building Council, was invited to the first summit of U.S. competitiveness and sustainable manufacturing. That was in 2007. And so for me to attend that summit and to learn at that time about all the different agencies that were doing so many things in regarding making industries more competitive and more energy efficient, I thought, you know, all of this information was out there and it was almost overwhelming. And so one of the things that came out of the summit was this formation of the Interagency Working Group on Sustainable Manufacturing. And so I just wanted to show you that for someone who's, you know, I'm working out in the street with customers, helping them with their energy problems. So I've learned that all of these groups were out there working on different tools, different programs, and different resources to help manufacturers be more competitive. And what came out of this summit, the initiative was to create sort of this clearinghouse for all of this information so it could be a one-stop shop for manufacturers to go to learn about the things they can do to reduce their costs, to get funding, and to become more competitive. So, and if you were to go to this site right now, and probably many of you are familiar with it, but if you're not, you should check this out because there are over, I think, 160 resources, programs, different tools for people to use. And right now we're actually adding, or the Department of Commerce Sustainability Manufacturing Group is adding a search feature to help navigate through all of these tools, which you can search for it by state, by industry sector, by the sustainability issue that's of concern to you, and also the type of information that you're looking for. Like if you want looking for incentives, or you're looking for, you want some case studies. So this for me, working out in the field with my customers, this is huge because I was searching all over, spending a lot of time trying to help my customers get the tools they need to be more competitive and more sustainable. So I just want to highlight a couple of the things that, that my customers have done. And the first one I want to talk about is this company, Berry Plastics, and they make containers and film. In fact, they make 1 million cups a day, which I thought was pretty interesting. They're based in Franklin, Kentucky, and what they did, they've taken advantage of the Department of Energy's Industrial Technologies program to get a free plant assessment. And they do these through their industrial assessment centers that are located across the country, and they're with participating universities. There's about 26 of them. And what they do is they look at, their goal is to evaluate and improve their steam, process heating. They look at the fans, pumps, and compressed air systems and make recommendations to manufacturers on how they can save energy. So in this particular case, Berry Plastics is looking at their compressed air and their steam systems. So as part of this assessment, what happens is faculty, trained students will spend a day at the plant and then come back with a list of recommendations for how they can improve energy efficiency. And what we found out is that just having an assessment, a corporation or a manufacturing facility, just getting a plant assessment, they're likely to do something on that list, even if it's just repairing airlines in their plant, which will result in 10% reduction of energy. So there's really this movement out there to get these plants to get these energy assessments. However, the bad news is this has been, I think, either so popular or there's just a huge need out there that there's a backlog right now to get these studies conducted. But what I will tell you is that what I've seen out there is that there's this emerging job market for sustainable manufacturing. At a recent life cycle assessment conference, that's the new buzz. There are kids out there. This is the new discipline to go into, the new career. So my vision is that eventually we will have the supply to meet the demand to do these plant assessments because they are effective and people take action. And these are helping manufacturers that really don't have the internal resources to do these studies. So that's one of the programs within this Sustainable Manufacturing Toolbox where you can get all the information. It's through the Department of Energy. But this has been really probably one of the most exciting things that, at least for most of my customers, that they get involved in. The next example I'd like to give is one on resources that are out there. And this is McLean Vehicle Systems. They're an automotive fasteners. They actually make decorative wheel nuts. And they're a Tier 1 supplier to Ford Motor Company. They're based in Royal Oak, Michigan. They were recently hit with a penalty by their utility company, and they came to us, as well as some other suppliers, to get a quote on the products they'd need to get them out of penalty. And our quote was the most competitive, and we provided them with that quote, and they came back and said, we can't do it because the ROI that we need to achieve is 1 year. And typically, if you're just looking at what you're going to do to get rid of the utility penalty, it's usually 18 months, maybe 2 years to get your ROI return, to get your return on that investment. So I directed them to this database for state incentives for renewables and efficiency projects. And again, if you haven't seen this, this is a great place to begin to look at what's available to fund these projects. I'm actually working with McLean Vehicle Systems right now. We have not yet secured the funding, but if they can get this and they can make the investment. One of the challenges they have is that they don't know how to use greenhouse gas metric to put that into their ROI. So that's always been a concern for the customers because they know that they're going to save money, but they wish they could get some a rebate or some sort of something they can put in the ROI to make that become a project that they can get approved and move forward on. Now finally, I'd like to talk about, so I've talked about a program, some resources out there, and also the last one here was an event that I went to in Toledo, Ohio. It was with Owens Corning, and this was a forum on energy efficiency in manufacturing, and a lot of corporations come there, and it was a wonderful setting. Mary Saunders was there. It was a nice opportunity to learn more about the federal and state support for energy efficiency improvements. And we also heard from companies that are working with these agencies to make that happen. And what was really exciting is that as I'm looking around the audience, I'm thinking that, you know what, everybody's in, everybody's on board, everybody's doing the right thing. It just seemed like probably there's, you know, within a couple of years, we'll all be energy efficient and doing the right thing within our manufacturing plants. There are other programs I'd like to talk, I wish I could talk about. There's the Sustainable Manufacturing American Regional Tours, there's the Green Suppliers Network, there's all these programs out there to help bring these practices of being competitive and sustainable to manufacturers that we need to take advantage of. So I just would like to share with you some results from a recent survey that I did. In advance of the second summit on U.S. competitiveness and sustainable manufacturing, I decided that in advance of going to this summit, I should probably bring some data with me, and I wanted to talk to some of my customers. So I interviewed actually 350. I sent a short survey out to about 350 of my customers. Sort of a representative samples of end users, OEMs, architects and engineers, and some contractors. And remarkably, I think, 170 responded. And I asked them several questions. I just want to highlight a couple of them here. The first one is I wanted to know, had they even heard about the Sustainable Manufacturing Initiative? And you know, it could be good or bad, but 25% of them had heard of the things that we were doing, or that the Department of Commerce with the Sustainable Manufacturing Initiative, what they were doing. 75% had not. So I decided to do a deep dive into the 25%. And what I found is that those companies that were, you know, saying, yes, we've heard all about it, they've already got sustainable practices in place. In fact, many of them, like Owens Corning, for example, or Dow Corning, Johnson Controls, they have sustainability departments. They have the resources to understand what it takes to be competitive, to be sustainable in their manufacturing process. In fact, BMW has even created their own sustainability metric. I thought that was pretty impressive. I guess companies are starting to do this because they really don't have anything yet that's standard that they can grab onto. Now, for those who said no, they typically don't have the resources to devote to sustainability initiatives. So that was, we've got some work to do, and I think that it's possible that this pie chart maybe, even 6 months from now will change. The other question I asked them was that does the company have any plans to implement a program to reduce their carbon footprint? And I thought this was great. Look, I mean, for me, if my customers want to do this, this means that they are on board with realizing that to be competitive and to be sustainable, they have to do the things needed to reduce their carbon footprint. Now, the other ones, again, I looked into, because I had one open-ended question, which some of it I can't repeat, but some of these people had entered in, but the folks that said no, as I looked in more closely into why, many of them it was because they weren't interested in reducing their carbon footprint. We're talking about small and medium manufacturers that are just trying to keep the lights on, just trying to keep their processes running. What they want to do, they want to reduce their energy usage, they want to reduce their waste, they want to reduce their production costs. All of these things that they do know will make them profitable, they'll save money, and indirectly or directly, they'll reduce their carbon footprint. So they don't like the talk about carbon footprint, they like the talk about being profitable and being, saving money and staying in business. So my conclusions from this survey, and I just think that as a statistician, you can come to different conclusions in any way you want to look at the numbers. But first of all, we've got some work to do to communicate what we're doing here with sustainability manufacturing tools. And secondly, we've got a lot of people on board. Maybe what we need to do is pitch it in a different way instead of just reducing the carbon footprint, but maybe reducing your energy use and becoming more competitive and more profitable. So finally, I was asked to share my perspectives on how the SMI, the Sustainable Manufacturing Tools, have helped U.S. firms seize opportunities and meet challenges in a green environment, a green economy. Well, one of the things that I thought is really important, it has helped my customers, is that having industry-specific support so they can have access to case studies, best practices, success stories. They need to see that this works and that industries are competitive. So that's one thing that I think will go a long way in making this challenge a success for many companies. And we need to continue to improve the access to the information that's out there, these tools that are available to them that they can use today to begin saving energy and saving money. And then finally, the third point is we need to get the message out there because folks they're not aware of the things that are going on, I sometimes say within the Beltway, but we're doing a really good job for those companies that have made sustainability a priority. But it's those folks that are still struggling, and I can tell you, I'm in Michigan, I see it every day, that they want to do the right thing. They need to know that those tools are out there and that there are people here in Washington that support them. And then finally, again, I hit on this about the support of the small and medium-sized manufacturers because without them, it's going to be very difficult for us to recover. We need them on board. We need to provide them with the support so they can get the tax incentives, so they can get the support from even their larger suppliers or their larger customers that they supply to, and that eventually they too will become competitive, not only in the U.S. but around the world. So that's my perspective. I thank you for the opportunity to share my experiences, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you for having me here today. I'll be speaking to you today about the global need for green energy technology and how it's creating enormous opportunities, and how we as a company have attempted to capture those global opportunities by using U.S. commercial service. For me, this has been a journey. A journey not necessarily about my feed software and automation company or about my biorefinery company, but it's really been a journey about bringing jobs and opportunities back to my little local community. I grew up in a small community, and I watched friends move to the city. I watched schools shrink, and I watched storefronts close. While building my company in my little community and promoting these products across rural America, I had the opportunity to take my pickup and travel all over the nation selling those feed mills. As we installed these products in these hundreds of small towns and visiting those small communities, it was impressed greatly upon me that what I was seeing in my own community was not happening just in my little town, but it was happening all over rural America. What had happened was the computer and technology age and its related opportunities had bypassed rural America and had passed up those communities, and many of them had died. It was then that I decided I was going to do my part to try to catch the next train, the renewable energy train, and try to reverse this trend, not just for my community, but also for rural America. The product that we developed was a modular ethanol production system. Some will call it a gas in a box. It's built in a factory, it can be shipped anywhere in the world and start making bioenergy. These systems can be reassembled like Lego blocks to build any size plant. Our target market is the 1 to 20 million gallon plant, but it can go all the way up to 100 million gallons. We have a cellulose pretreatment pod that can incorporate some of the revolutionary technology from our biology partners and convert feedstocks such as waste paper and corn cobs. Modular systems have many advantages, and that they can be located next to the feedstocks, and for as little as $3 to $5 million, you can build a commercial cellulosic ethanol plant. We believe that the key to meeting the global demand and bringing the jobs back to the U.S. is to build them like peas in a pod, just like Henry Ford did when he built his automobile. Most notably, if you remember nothing else about our product, we believe we've solved the Achilles heel of cellulosic ethanol production. This whole cellulose thing, it's a very bulky material, and the transportation is a big issue. So by building the smaller plants and locating them next to the feedstocks, you can reduce the transportation issue. It's especially important in international markets. We've tested this on many feedstocks, from waste wood to waste paper. Waste paper is real interesting, by the way. 50 to 60% of the nation's landfills are waste paper. We've also tested it on waste food products. Like 20% of the nation's watermelons are thrown away each year. So if you can take some of these waste products and turn them into ethanol, that's a good thing. We believe these international opportunities are a big opportunity, and that by using renewable energy technology such as ours, you can capture those opportunities and bring those jobs back to these communities and have a tremendous impact on the local community. In our example, we've quoted about 500 systems now, totaling over $1 billion in quotes, and we intend on bringing back 450 jobs into our little local community, and we only got 800 people in the town. Just think of the impact that type of play is going to make on small communities. We believe the key to making this happen quickly is a circle of collaboration, where you have to have economic development groups working with local manufacturers, working with universities to validate the technology and not make sure it's not just a bunch of snake oil, and train the future workforce. Also to work with farmers or waste stream providers or other feedstock providers. So we intend to do this model in our local region, carry it across the country, and then do it across the world. In southern Minnesota, we've tried to practice what we preach. We've created a renewable biofuel collaborative. We've created a memorandum of understanding to create the state's first cellulose feedstock plant. A vision of Reggie Edwards, our local economic development director, is to create the Minnesota Energy Valley, which is, the intent is to be like the Silicon Valley of California. We've gotten support from our local congressman, Tim Walz. We've gotten support from our governor, Tim Pawlenty. We're going to go on a trade mission shortly. Again, this whole renewable energy thing is a real opportunity across the whole world. And if we don't jump on that as a country, we're going to miss it, just like rural America missed the computer technology revolution. We believe that the different pillars of government also need to collaborate to make this happen. We've gotten noticed by the Secretary of Energy, who recently came to see our technology. So getting back to the commercial service, again, it's a global opportunity, and it all needs to funnel down to these little communities and the jobs they have to bring. So what's the U.S. commercial service like, and how have I used it? The way I would like to, it's kind of like having a relative already living there. So an example, I just went to a foreign country. You know, you get into the country and you land and they don't speak your language and you're kind of scared and nervous, but I had the address of the U.S. Commercial Service. So I went to the U.S. Commercial Service. They spoke my language, that was nice. It was someone I could trust, and they were enthused about promoting my products in their country. They did country research, market research. They showed me all kinds of information. Many of these countries have mandates and support programs and so forth that are a big part of selling renewable energy technologies into those countries. They've got some excellent websites. The way we used advantage of this websites was we hired a bunch of college interns. It was kind of interesting. Like, I brought in 13 interns for the summer, gave them these websites and said, just go research all these companies, look at what the opportunities are, look at what the different feedstocks that they have, and create a summary back for us. And what was neat about it is we were able to get some of the best and brightest kids from our community, and they could see the opportunities of the world and then understand how they could bring them back to their local community. Another thing we've used the U.S. Commercial Service for is Gold Key programs. The way the Gold Key programs work, you spend about, I don't know, $1,000, $2,000, and you tell them what you're doing and who you'd like to see, and they'll make up you with potential customers and companies in those countries. And then it's pretty neat because then they'll help facilitate the meetings, and you know, you don't just go meet the janitor, you go meet the movers and shakers of these companies, and it just really, really cuts to the chase real quickly when you're trying to penetrate a country. Some will refer to it as having like an office in the country, some will refer to it as like a beachhead, but this whole Gold Key thing, you get in and you meet the players and you just cut years away versus walking up and down the streets trying to find somebody to talk to you. The other way the U.S. Commercial Service has helped is they've introduced us to financing mechanism, the Export-Import Bank, the SBA. There's many programs out there to help, everything from helping to market to helping to fill purchase orders to financing foreign receivables. So something to take home. Just a sec. I challenge you to develop your own renewable-related technologies, develop your own collaborations, and also utilize the commercial service to bring these global opportunities and resulting jobs back to your own home, back to your own communities, and get not just your company, but all America back on the train. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the honor of joining you today. My colleague Paula DePerna is also here with us, and it's great to see some old friends and colleagues in the audience. What I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes explaining what our company does, Climate Exchange, and how the environmental markets that we host are really essentially based on and driven by climate and weather phenomenon and information that NOAA assembles. To a degree, you can consider Donna and Mark to be in the hardware business, and ourselves as operating of a financial institution as being in the software business, but you all know that software can be pretty darn important. I also want to talk about some exciting examples that we see every day of win-win-win innovations that not only reduce climate risk, they enhance energy security and competitiveness, and on some of those items we think that NOAA might be able to help further and make us smarter and better in optimizing and winning in this information economy. And I also want to throw out some challenges to NOAA in some areas where their skill sets, their science, and their capacity might be able to help us even do better. And generate exportable competitive edge, because if we can do these things sooner and faster and smarter, that's going to be a real source of opportunity, jobs, and competition and competitive edge. But I did want to present this. I only have 2 slides. Wanted to present this one because I had the honor a couple of years ago of working with a lot of folks at NOAA in co-chairing a conference that was honoring, co-chairing with Dr. Richard Spinrad, honoring the 50-year anniversary of the Keeling Curve. And I draw your attention to this link because it was a terrific compilation of, a summary compilation, if you will, of the state of science, Professor Sokolow and others, the state of economics, and the state of some solutions. And it was a real exciting time, and it was just first-class folks that I got to be around for that event. So if you are so interested, it was a terrific event. if I could just go to the next slide. What we do at Climate Exchange is to build and operate rules-based pollution reduction and trading systems. There have been major successes on this front, and we've been a part of that, but there are many owners of the success. If you have a transparent, regulated, rules-based emission reduction market mechanism, we see there's very powerful evidence that if you use a price-based system, provide clarity, that technology, innovation, and managerial creativity can deliver major environmental protection and improvement at very low cost. And it might be germane for this point in time in the climate debate to make the following observation. Many of the things that were said about how harmful forcing down dramatically sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide emissions in this country, which has been an across-the-board success, sound like an echo chamber. We're hearing many of the same things. But I would note that before the SO2 program was implemented in the Clean Air Act debates of the 1990 amendments, there were a whole range of estimates as to what it would cost society. The only estimates that were anywhere close to what it ultimately did cost were those of the US EPA, and they were the lowest. So there's some good news, I think, that we can follow on. So we operate various exchanges. Our approach is the following model. When there is a law in place, such as the United States sulfur dioxide or nitrogen oxide programs, or California carbon credits, or Connecticut renewable energy credits, we will put up an exchange product, a regulated exchange instrument to facilitate transparency, low-cost transacting, and so forth. That's what we do at Chicago Climate Futures Exchange. At the Chicago Climate Exchanges and the emerging Tianjin Climate Exchange is an example of our other model, when there is not a law in place, such as the case for U.S. greenhouse gases, and such is the case in China and in India. We will try to build in a bottom-up fashion, working with those who are ready to lead and get the experience and methods proven and tested in the field. Now, it's sometimes easy to forget how important it is to be cost-effective while we're managing these risks. As was pointed out by Secretaries Chu and Locke, the risks are profound. The cost will not be trivial. But if we can optimize the system using our best science, collaboration between public and private sectors, innovations, we can do this at very low cost. And low cost is important. We need those resources for other environmental challenges, for other social challenges, health, infrastructure, education, and so on. Now, let me turn to some of the collaboration that we've been honored to have with not only information and services put out by NOAA, but by the U.S. Forest Service expertise, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and others. A couple of simple examples. When we started to design the Chicago Climate Exchange in 1999, we knew, based on evidence from these other environmental markets, that not only market prices be affected by weather. In fact, they are affected by weather and meteorological conditions. But some of the mitigation options are, to a degree, dependent on weather conditions. For example, some of the agricultural best management practices that are well known to soak up carbon and generate other benefits I'll talk about in a moment, you need to know that crops are growing. So that biomass is being generated and carbon is being transferred into the soil. And we said, what about circumstances when there's not a good growth due to weather conditions, for example? We said, well, how would we define when we don't have good growth? And we we had to poke around, but we did find that NOAA had a very sophisticated set of regional drought indices. And we said, there's your metric. There's no bias. It's put out on a routine basis. So we said, if we have a drought circumstance, we'll have to adjust the crediting factors to reflect scientific reality. Now, what we've been able to experience since the launch of a voluntary, legally binding cap-and-trade system here in the United States since 2003, with 450 members, 110 emitters, 24 power companies, cities, universities, major manufacturers, IBM, DuPont, Intel among them, is that you can have all of the parts work together in a multi-sector, multi-gas greenhouse gas reduction trading program. To put it bluntly, a lot of the mystery is gone. The parts all can fit together. Independent verification can work. There is expertise out there to inspect farm and forest projects. And these folks are ready for an intelligent transition into the mandatory system, and we look forward to helping them realize that. Now, Our company started as a small business, as these other companies did. 10 years ago, we were 3 people, and we've grown to over 60. We've also helped stimulate a number of other career paths in project verification, aggregation, inspection, auditing, and so forth. We've exported this American technology. The European Climate Exchange is one of our subsidiaries. It is the busiest exchange in the European mandatory carbon market environment. So we have a lot here in the United States. We're not nearly as far behind on this particular financial and regulatory innovation as some might think. Now, let me just quickly summarize some of the win-win-win energy and climate solutions that we get to see every day and identify how NOAA might be able to help us even do better throughout the industrial landscape. Very simple example. To me, it's bread and butter. I love it. Natural gas processing, production, and transportation, inevitably there's leaks in the processes. Now, if you can plug those leaks, we have more gas for our houses and our businesses, right? That's energy security. We have less safety problems, and we have lower greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Unfortunately, we're in kind of a crude stage at managing this opportunity because it's sort of manual. Now, if we could have, I don't know if it's L-band or infrared, some sort of remote sensing technology to scan an entire pipeline system and production field and identify those leaks, then we'd be able to pinpoint the resources, go in and get that triple benefit solution. Another very simple example, a small but very important and fun part of our program are some of the agricultural best management practices, such as continuous conservation tillage that are well known to soak up carbon dioxide from the air, so you get a climate benefit. You get reduced fuel consumption because you're dragging the tractor and the equipment back and forth across the field a lot less. You get reduced soil runoff, so we're keeping our physical gold there on the land, and you get enhanced climate resilience, as a matter of fact, by having a solid and healthy soil type. The verification systems that we use there and the fine-tuning of those systems could also benefit from some of the NOAA instruments, some of the satellite and other remote sensing tools that we know are out there. And I know remote sensing may sound, sort of, banal to some of you, but we think it's incredibly important. And I'll talk about a couple more examples in just a moment. Now, we also see, as the Secretary has noted, a whole lot of greenhouse gas reduction options that are available right now in manufacturing and elsewhere that throw off competitiveness, jobs, and energy security. For example, utilizing smart motors, variable speed motors, heat recovery systems. These are things that are all doable now, all help improve our economy, our competitive situation, and reduce emissions. A couple of areas where we think there is an opening and some of the tools are being used. Perhaps they can be improved further. Public-private collaboration, real opportunity with NOAA and the other agencies to optimize our not only location but the design of wind and solar and other renewable energy systems. A real on-the-ground example, informing the state of the climate, possible changes in climate situations, so that we pick the best species for reforestation projects, using remote sensing and analytics to confirm in a low-cost way that tropical protection of tropical forest protection and tropical forest regeneration is occurring and is getting properly credited in the carbon markets. In a particular example that we face right now, our company was asked to provide some help to the state of Pennsylvania, which is implementing the first regional water quality improvement credit trading system to help contribute to an improved health of the Chesapeake Bay. We need some basic science answers to understand, does it matter which tributary we clean up first? Is it a cumulative or is it an episodic problem? Can we bank credits over time, or is that going to be a problem? We simply don't have all of that science nailed down in the oceans programs that NOAA conceivably could be very helpful. So let me just summarize by saying, in the United States, market-based mechanisms to reduce pollution have worked extraordinarily well. You provide clarity, provide rules, allow a transparent, regulated market to work. We've seen major successes here. Many of these solutions that are available have multiple benefits for the environment, for energy security, and for our economy. And let me just close in saying it's an honor to be able to participate in this event and be around the folks again from NOAA. And I'm saying that not just because I'm a big-time weather geek. Thank you.
Thank you so much to each of the panelists. These have been some terrific presentations. small businesses, very innovative approaches to emerging green space, how to be competitive in that, how to create jobs, how to reduce greenhouse gas pollution. And I thank each of you very, very much for your willingness to be here, but also boiling down what is inevitably a very complex story into just a small, understandable, quick nugget of information for us. I would like to open up the floor to your questions and then invite the panelists to respond. When you pose a question, would you please just stand up, project, identify yourself and your affiliation. And if you wish to direct a question to one of the panelists, please do so. Otherwise, if it's just an open-ended one, we'll let them duke it out in terms of who's going to respond. So, questions? Yes, right here, please.
My name is Tom Worrell, and I'm the founder and owner of a company called Worrell Water Technologies. Water may seem to be far distant from energy, but it is inextricably intertwined. Without water, you can't produce energy, you can't move things around, you can't do anything. We talk about reaching the peak in oil and energy and so forth. Many people think we have gone beyond that in the water. One of our products is we call a living machine, and it's a distributive system or a local system for treating wastewater. I'm not going to give a bunch of statistics, but the state of California probably wouldn't be in trouble right now if they realized that 25% of the electricity in California is used to move water around. I don't know what that translates in dollars or in carbon footprints, but it's enormous. 3% of the entire United States energy is used just to treat water. That's not counting moving it around. Water's heavy, water is hard to move. Most manufacturing processes use water in one way or another. And it's a finite thing. We don't have, I think we've all been raised that you turn the tap on and there's the water. And it ain't true. And I think, I forgot to point it out, that our fresh water is in danger of melt, but we didn't have much to start with. And we are using more and polluting more than we are renewing. So our whole emphasis is to try to educate people into the interconnectedness between all these things. And the gentleman from Singapore asked a while ago he mentioned that things were holistic. Well, you can't treat, in my opinion, an energy problem without treating a water problem and many other problems that can't be looked at all by themselves. So maybe ethanol production is a great thing. The only thing is it uses 20 times as much water as producing gasoline. So how do we deal with that? I don't have any solutions to that, but I do know that we can become much more efficient with energy and water if we put our minds together and look at the whole problem, not just one part of it.
Thank you so much for flagging that very important topic. Before I ask any of the panelists if they wish to respond, I want to just alert you to the fact that we have with us here Mary Saunders, who is in the audience, Acting Assistant Secretary for Manufacturing and Services at the International Trade Administration at Commerce, and she can also assist with any technical questions. Panelists, Mark, were you willing to jump in?
Yeah, I could jump in a little bit. Again, technologies are moving fast, but in the ethanol side, ethanol's been beat up for water usage. One thing we're playing with is a combination feedstock. So if you take a waste stream, let's take, pick an example, like waste pop. So if you take waste pop and put it with another feedstock, you can in essence grab the water from the waste pop, grab the sugar, convert that over into ethanol, and use the other feedstock, so you can end up doing it with no water usage. And so there are many technologies that are coming to solve those problems, but they were problems before.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with the spirit of your comments. About 2 weeks ago, I was up in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, touring a wastewater treatment facility where they are to help solve the Chesapeake Bay nutrient pollution problems, upgrading their wastewater treatment facility. It's a very small town, and it's very, very expensive. And the engineers at the site said, this is going to take a lot more electricity to run these denitrification units. And the credit trading system that the Pennsylvania folks have created is having a little difficulty getting started. But the whole point is they could partner with a farmer who would not only reduce nutrient runoff by some very low-tech solutions, they could get paid for it, and they could have more productive cropland. So everybody, I think, does sympathize with your point that it's a major energy cost. And there might be better ways to solve some of these problems, sometimes using partnerships and low-tech approaches. And this is the challenge that we're facing. And now it looks like this idea of taking advantage of that flexibility and those cost savings and partnering might be applied to the Chesapeake Bay region. And this is where we do need some help from NOAA figuring out how much flexibility can we provide in these compliance options and still get to the scientific and environmental goals we have to get to.
Well, I was just going to say, I live in Michigan, surrounded by the Great Lakes, and we know that people want our water. And so we are very careful with how we use our water in our manufacturing with some of the manufacturers that I work with. And there are some case studies, if you go out to the Department of Energy website, on how manufacturers are using their water within their facility, like the potable water, to reduce their demand for water. So it's recognized, and I've got my eye on it because I like to fish, so I'm very concerned about our water resources, and so that's the only comment I wanted to make on that. Thanks.
Let me add just finally that water is one of the areas in which we're seeing some of the most dramatic changes in terms of impacts of climate change in the United States already. Not only increases in extreme precipitation events, just really, really intense rainfall, but also increases in drought. And this is an area that is very much on NOAA's radar screen, not only in terms of documenting it, but trying to get ahead of the curve and be able to provide the kind of forecasts about likelihood of both extreme storms, but also droughts. And NIDIS, our National Integrated Drought Information System, is one such climate service tool that we are currently providing with forecasts a number of years out about drought. We hope to be able to expand that and provide additional kinds of information like that that will be very useful for some of the kinds of planning purposes. Let's go to another question. Yes, sir, right here.
This is a question for Mark. My name is Jeff Truxas, and I'm the founder of Green Earth Fuels. We're a biodiesel company, and I'm happy to see the Secretary's back because it's playing on some of his earlier comments. What the investment community needs is sort of business certainty that's going to create the jobs. About 3 years ago, we started our biodiesel company. It's one of the largest in the country. We got $170 million in investment from Goldman Sachs and the Carlyle Group, which is fantastic. We responded to the sort of market signals, which was a tax credit and the implementation of the renewable fuel standard. The tax credit's expiring in 2 months. The renewable fuel standard was passed in 2007 and hasn't been implemented yet. Our industry as a whole is at about 30% capacity, which is probably, according to our industry estimates, a loss of about 25,000 jobs, but it's still all hanging out there. The greater concern is our investors, who are major investors, are pulling back from the renewable energy, the biofuel space, because of a lack of certainty. As a sort of cellulosic provider, are you feeling that same sort of uncertainty, and are you seeing the attention from the White House and your legislators that these tax credits have to be renewed early in advance and for long-term periods, and policies that are put in place have to be maintained? It's great to look out in the future in climate change, but we've got the RFS, which is the first greenhouse gas bill passed by Congress, not even implemented, and uncertainty in how it's going to be implemented.
Mark, before you answer that, Greg, could we do a quick time check?
We have time for one more question, and we also want to make sure we take one from the online community who's been following along with this.
Okay, so I have a suggestion, and that is that could we have a couple of those questions? Let's just hear the questions all together, and then we'll provide more integrated responses to the extent that that's possible. Courtney?
Sure. As you all know, this is being
sent via live webcast, and we've got some comments from Facebook. One of the good comments today was really there's no one answer to what is a renewable energy source. It has to be a combination of what is available locally, which I think we talked a little bit about today. One of the questions that what people want an answer to is business seems to have the resources to make these investments that we're talking about today. What can consumers do, and what are the tools for consumers to become more energy efficient and more sustainable?
Okay, and then one last question. Yes, down here in front. Yes.
Paul Falkowski from the Rutgers Energy Institute, and it seems to me there are three pillars. There's a rational energy policy, which is rational, which is very difficult to control. There's corporate responsibility at the largest level, and for that, Secretary Chu, for example, came from AT&T Bell Labs. AT&T Bell Labs is a shell of what it used to be. Westinghouse doesn't have very much research and development anymore. General Electric doesn't have very much. We don't invest anymore in the long-term infrastructure of corporate America. We take our feed corn and eat it, which is why the Chinese have, and many other Asian countries have gone very far ahead, very fast. And the third one is educational opportunities. So if you look across the country, I run an energy institute at one university. There are exactly 24 of them in the entire country. These are, of the 24, 6 are private universities. The rest are at public universities. The public universities train 75% of the American population, and yet receive a very small fraction of the funds from the state or federal governments for education, for fueling the pipeline of engineers and science that feed the research and development, that feed the industry, that make us competitive. So at some point, this cycle has to be, this broken cycle has to be repaired. And I don't know who is responsible within the federal government. It's actually a lot of agencies, and private industries, of course, have to be part of this. I think one of the things that you would see, Mark, and you would see perhaps in other parts of this, is that small companies are eaten up by large companies at some point in a business model. And that is a mode by which businesses, large businesses, reduce their risk. But it's not a mode for really going forward strategically in this country, and it's something that leads us essentially down a very, very bad road.
Thank you, Paul. We've had 3 questions. I'd like to just go down the line with the panelists and invite them to respond to any one of those questions as they choose. Michael, do you want to start?
Well, I think that there's a tremendous amount of information distributed by federal and state and local agencies on energy efficient appliances, energy efficiency improvements that have enormous returns on investment. I think it was Secretary Chu or Secretary Locke identified the sort of the paradox of low-hanging fruit that is unharvested. It was the topic of my dissertation, actually, and it is a paradox. I'm frankly a big believer that if we can put a little push into the system, that consumers, will gravitate and eagerly take on more efficient vehicles, more efficient appliances, residential energy improvements, and again, at the risk of sounding pedestrian, things like public transportation systems and availability are vitally important that any individual or household can take advantage of and demand from their local and regional governments. So. That's the small bit of input I have on that one.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I'll talk about that investment thing. I got some strong feelings here, so bear with me. To me, the best thing the government did was announce that it was going to help renewable energy. Also, the worst thing the government did was announce it was going to help with renewable energy. Because what happens is we see hundreds and hundreds of projects, all with their pools of investors. And I believe there's rules associated with them where the projects can't start and get government, they can't be started and get government help, so they're all stopped. And they're waiting for the government to make these decisions and get going. Otherwise, a lot of the projects could have gotten going. Yeah, they're going to get turbocharged eventually. But I'm just passionate about that. We just got to get this train moving. That's why I put the train on it's stopped in the tracks.
I'd like to make a comment regarding education and the future of realizing the need for the students now in the universities to really grasp these opportunities within becoming a sustainable, energy efficient, renewable energy. All of these sort of disciplines are real exciting for students right now. If you go on college campuses, that's what they're talking about. And the programs need funding. And we're still maybe funding, I won't talk about the universities and how they allocate their resources towards the different departments, but it has to be recognized that sustainable manufacturing, life cycle assessment, these are emerging job markets. There's a huge need for that. And it's now, with these students out there, it's a sexy career field to get into. And if we can support them somehow through even the industries looking at ways to demand this from the universities, that they need this type of, they need these types of students, these trained individuals out there to help them become sustainable, understanding the best ways to be competitive. And I think that will go a long way. It's a win-win for everyone. But it's, like I said, with those industrial assessment centers, there's only 26 of them across the country, and there's a 2-year backlog of companies who want to have an assessment conducted. There's a huge need out there, and I think we need to fill that, because these students, our future, they can make a difference. So I thank you for allowing me to comment on that.
Please join me in thanking the panelists for their terrific presentations. I'd like to now turn the microphone back to Secretary Gary Locke for some concluding remarks. Mr. Secretary?
Well, thank you very much, Jane, for moderating the panel. And as you can tell from Jane's presentation and just her knowledge, as well as Secretary Chu's impeccable credentials and his depth of knowledge, that President Obama very much believes in science, cares about the science, and wants unfettered decisions based on science. And so we've got a great group of people at NOAA and the scientists at NOAA, as well as various departments, and it's good to know that this administration is being guided by the scientists and research. And that's why the President has put so much money as part of the Stimulus Act into research and development. And that's why I also believe that we've got to continue to promote education. And the comment about funding of our colleges and universities, and I think Governor Knowles would acknowledge this, that no matter how difficult our economics are, and whether at the federal level, the state level, or the local level, we have to continue our support for higher education. We've got to focus on early education, knowing that education begins not at the time that kids go to kindergarten, but really at the time of birth. And we need to focus on early education. And we need to continue to emphasize math and science, critical thinking skills, knowing that people will constantly change their professions, and if we give them the great educational tools, they will be able to use that education to adapt to the changing technology, the changing demands of business, and people will, quite frankly, go into a whole host of different fields throughout their lifetime and not be focusing or confined to one particular career or profession. You all, from the discussions and from what I've been able to hear, have had a great conversation, and great to know that Department of Commerce and some of our programs have been able to help companies export their technology and help find customers around the world, and that there's a great appetite, a great hunger for what we in America offer by way of technology in clean energy, energy efficiency, renewable energy. And as many of you have been saying, people are waiting on the sidelines, and the good thing that government did was to promote renewable energies, and maybe the one bad thing is that we're promoting renewable energies without that certainty. And that's why we need to pass this legislation. We need your help, quite frankly. You are the experts. You understand exactly what this means in your specific industries, your specific sectors, whether it's from the nonprofit sector, the educational sector, the private sector, the for-profit sector, whether it's in energy efficiency, renewable energy, alternative energy, R&D, you name it. We need your help. You know exactly how this affects your particular sector, and you can speak with greater clarity and greater power in terms of the potential that the legislation would have for America in terms of job creation and with respect to the development within your particular sector. And you would actually have more credibility
And so we welcome you, we urge you to let your voices be known, to tell people in real terms that they can understand. And you are better at that than many of us here in Washington, D.C. Talk about it from your own perspective, what the energy legislation or the challenges of passing energy legislation and climate change means to you, to your communities, to your profession, to your sector. And the more voices that we're able to have amplified, I think the more the public will understand. Actually, the public already gets this. They're really demanding the solution and the action. But your perspective clearly will influence the policymakers here in Washington, D.C. So please go back to your communities, let your voices be heard among your colleagues, your business community, the local and state leaders, editorial boards, and obviously those people here in Washington, D.C. But thank you very much for coming. I guess Tony Knowles comes the farthest in the continental or the North America, and the gentleman from Singapore comes the farthest. But you traveled from Singapore just to come to this conference, so that's great. But thank you all. I know you've taken time out of your busy schedules, and we thank you very much.